Hey, this is Marlon, and welcome back to another episode of Future Steps Creative, the online business show that talks about strategy around content marketing, website strategy, brand building, and so on. So, if this is the sort of thing that you're into, I want to help you build a flexible lifestyle business or build your brand. Go ahead and feel free to follow the content. So, in this episode of the show, what I want to talk about is podcasting. And obviously, this is something that I'm doing right now, and it's another way for you to do content. So maybe you're looking to start a podcast, you've considered it, or maybe you're just thinking, okay, what's the worth? What's the value in doing a podcast? Is it something that you could do? I'm going to say 100% yes. It's something that it's a really effective way to publish content, and it's just another way to publish content. So what I'm going to do is share with you, as I've got some insights, I'm going to share with you at a high level a few different tips that would help you to start a podcast. So reason the reason why you'd want to actually do a podcast as opposed to or even in conjunction with doing videos or doing blog posting is that it's just another way for people to consume content. It's different. It's one where you can actually consume the content whilst you're doing other things. So it's audio based, primarily podcasts. I'm doing this as a video show, so you can actually see this on YouTube as well. But you don't have to do a video component to it. A podcast is typically going to be just audio recordings. And then people are actually able to do stuff. I personally listen to podcasts when I'm driving, or if I'm doing the dishes, or just doing some other activity that I don't necessarily need to concentrate on the content 100% of the time. Whereas with a video or something that you read, you tend to have to focus on a screen. You have to kind of see what's happening or read to be able to appreciate the content 100%. Whereas with a podcast, it's more of a relaxed, in a way, a more relaxed way of consuming the content. And it's kind of more intimate, I would say, because you're actually, the format can help you make more of an emotional connection with your audience rather than being sort of like, so overproduced as videos can be. Videos can be sort of overproduced, or writing a blog post can be so structured and rigid in a way that it seems a little bit less formal, or sorry, more formal when you do these things as opposed to, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say is it's more casual doing a podcast, at least the way I do it, than doing a video or doing some sort of tutorial, or writing a blog post. So it's just one more way of listening to content. And the same people that watch videos, the people that watch videos or read articles don't necessarily want to listen to audio, and vice versa. So it's just another way to reach your audience or to reach a wider audience. Okay, so I'm going to get into a few different tips here for starting a podcast. So tip number one is choose the right subject, okay? The right topics that you're going to talk about. And this is part and parcel of just your whole content strategy anyway, regardless of whether or not it's a podcast. But with a podcast, you're primarily talking as opposed to showing something on screen, doing a tutorial, or just writing something down. So you need to be able to talk about this thing, this subject, on an ongoing basis. So you don't want to feel like, okay, not again, I don't want to talk about this anymore, because you want to commit for the long haul. And as a result, you need to choose something that you're passionate enough about to talk about. And it comes into whether or not you have the right audience, or you've actually figured out who your audience is. That's going to obviously help you know what type of topics to talk about, but it's also going to help you determine whether or not you want to start a podcast talking about this thing. Because again, like I said, doing videos and other pieces of content can be quite different. You can do a lot of research and present things in a more polished or more systematic way in a video. You can go ahead and do things a bit more tightly in a video, at least if it's really well produced. Whereas with a podcast, it's more like a chat. So you want to make sure that you're happy doing that going forward. So obviously looking at what your audience is looking for, marrying that into your content, your overall content strategy would make it easier for you to do a podcast show that is going to, just help to enhance the whole content strategy. One thing that I do is syndicate content. So I might produce a video and then convert that into a podcast. So that's one way where you could actually just put out the same piece of content, but in a different format, in a different context. And as such, it adds a bit more value. You can probably go into a bit more depth, more with a long format podcast. Whereas with a video, it's normally like a 5 to 10 minute video if it's for YouTube, unless it's a tutorial based thing where you need a longer time to do that. The next point that I want to make is that equipment is important, audio equipment especially, because this is a podcast, it's audio based. Having a great microphone helps, but you don't necessarily need to start out with a microphone that is like top notch or super expensive. In fact, you probably already have enough gear already. If you've got a smartphone or a tablet, you probably have enough there to start a podcast, because you could actually hold your phone up to your mouth, and as long as it's in close proximity to your mouth and you're recording in a quiet enough environment, there shouldn't really be bad audio quality. If there are free software tools that you can use to clean up some background noise. It's not going to work magic, so you do need to make sure that you're in a quiet environment as much as possible. But if there's slight hiss or background noise and things like that, there's free tools like Audacity, which is an open source audio editor that you can use to remove some background noise. And it does a really good job if you're, in a good enough environment. But the main thing is to have a microphone as close as possible without, it being too overpowering. Just make sure it's within a close proximity of your speech. So that way you're being picked up well above any background noise. So you could start with that, but I do recommend that you get a mic, an external mic. So it could be a lav mic, one of those clip-on mics, or you could get a dynamic mic, like something that what I'm using now. I'm using the Samsung Q2U, which is a USB and XLR microphone. It's more for professional use. This can plug into the computer, and it can plug into a mixing desk, a console. It has an XLR professional connection here, which goes into big consoles. So you could start with that and basically record it into your computer or record it into some external audio recorder or into your phone or tablet. And then you could use something like an Audacity on your computer to edit the podcast and so on. Let's talk about the format. There are various types of formats. One really popular format is to do interview-based or interview-style podcasting. And this is where you just get interesting people to come on the podcast and you ask them questions. You interview them and they share their stories, they share their knowledge, their expertise. And as a result of that, you're creating good content from just having that interview. But the easiest way to start, if you don't want to reach out to people, or you might not be in that position yet where you feel like, okay, I'm ready to start doing interviews, or maybe it's not that type of, obviously I'm talking about in the context of business or brand building, not an entertainment podcast or some other alternative podcast, but I'm talking about from a business perspective. You might just want to share your expertise, your knowledge, and so on. And do a solo podcast, or you could partner with somebody else who shares the same ethos, the same kind of interests, and you could just have a conversation. And those formats, I enjoy those formats really very much because, it's conversational. You can kind of like relax and talk about things with just a friend, like you have a friend next to you. However, this is not always possible. I do a solo podcast right now, and in future I might do interviews, or I might, you know, collaborate with other people, you know, as a panelist or something. But for now, it is what it is. I'm just putting out the content to share my expertise and to actually help you get on the road to doing the things that you want to be doing. So choose a format that works for you. At the end of the day, there's no wrong or right answer to any of it. And you have to start and find your kind of rhythm and figure out what's the best thing for you anyway. So in terms of getting the podcast set up, let's just quickly touch on that before I finish this episode off. I actually, at this point in time, I publish my podcast through my WordPress website. So if you already have a WordPress website, that is a way for you to already, a way for you to already publish your podcast via a plugin called Blueberry, which is what I use on my site at the moment. And that allows me to upload my edited MP3 audio to my website. And then I essentially publish it as a blog post, and it sends it out to the podcast apps and so on. Obviously, that takes some setting up to do and so on. If there's interest, I might do a guide on that or do some sort of tutorial on that. But I did that way because I already had the setup that I was paying for, and I didn't want to necessarily pay for a host again on top of what I've already got going. But there's some value to be had in having a podcast hosting company take care of the hosting and the publishing of the podcast. All you got to do is upload it. Obviously, you pay a fee, whether that's monthly or yearly for that. And I'm actually about to move across to one of those platforms as well. So I'll report back on how that goes once I go through that process. But I wanted to take a lot of the load off of what I'm doing and just hand that off and just pay for it. So that's one reason for me to do that. But also, when I started doing the podcast, I wanted to just test things out and see whether or not it's something that I was, all right with doing. Is it something I'm going to continue with? And then I can decide, okay, let's move across to a fully paid platform. So that's pretty much a high level view on the tips and some tips that I've got for you there. If you've got any questions, reach out to me on marlonmcpherson.com and I will try and answer any questions there or leave comments on the YouTube video. Also, I will be putting out more content around this in terms of digging deeper into my equipment setup on stuff. I might do some videos on those. So make sure you subscribe to my email list on marlonmcpherson.com. Just any of my sign up buttons on there should drop you into my email list, and you'll be updated when I do release new YouTube videos or any tutorials on this or any kind of content. So I'm rambling now. That means I'm a little bit tired. So hopefully that has been valuable to you. I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and take care. Have a great week.